if I just start with the first question, I saw that you used to work for the Saints or with the Northampton Saints. With the changes there are in rugby now surrounding the new gum shields and these new processes looking into the head injuries, do you think there is still more that can be done for these players?
Well, the first thing to say is I worked for the Saints from the first year of professionalism in 1996 until approximately 10 years ago. But most of my focus on a day-to-day basis has been with Northamptonshire Cricket.
Yeah.
But as you probably know, I'm very much involved with the pressure group, Progressive Rugby, and trying to bring about change in terms of welfare of rugby at all levels, from schools through to international level. There's been a lot of change. I don't think it's necessarily my pressure group that have been responsible for everything, but certainly the last 4 years have seen a lot of change. Most of that has been wrought by the court case, which is still to be resolved. I still think there's a lot more to be done. There are new technologies coming on board, and you mentioned instrumented mouth guards, IMGs. They're still very much a research tool.
Yeah.
In fact, on Monday I was at Northampton School for Boys because we're doing a study of instrumented mouth guards on the under-18 team, and there's lots of teething problems. Sometimes they don't work. Sometimes they record things when players have not been involved in any collisions. The World Rugby has chosen arbitrarily 75G as a threshold for bringing players off in international rugby for a head injury assessment, but there isn't any science to that at the moment. It's just guesswork. So there's a long way to go on instrumented mouth guards. There's been work, and we're involved with the work here at the university, on looking at something called microRNAs, which are expressed in players' saliva if they've taken an impact. And this work has been known about for some time from road traffic accidents. And the holy grail, really, of being able to assess an athlete who's had a sports-related concussion is to have an objective measure. And it's possible that saliva eventually may be able to provide us with some definite answers. The head injury assessment process is poor. As we found in the Six Nations this year, it's not foolproof. A Scottish player passed an HIA by the Scottish international team doctor, and then came out and sat on the bench, and the coaching staff realised that he was confused and couldn't remember any of the game plan. And it was actually the coaching staff who said he can't go back on. The doctor had actually passed him to go back on. So you realise there's lots of problems with the immediate assessment. There have been improvements in terms of having concussion spotters and obviously more access to playbacks to see if you've missed a significant injury. But there's a long way to go to make this foolproof.
So as you said about Progressive Rugby, I did find out through Progressive Rugby. I did just want to ask, what made them be set up? What made you decide a non-profit organisation was needed for rugby and head injuries?
Well, Progressive Rugby began in February 2021. It came together only 2 months after the group of ex-rugby players brought their legal action against the World Rugby, the RFU and the Welsh Rugby Union. We felt very strongly about this. I'd looked after some of the players who were involved, and was obviously very saddened and alarmed. And progressive rugby contains members who almost universally have played a lot of rugby themselves. They love rugby. They're doctors, they're ex-players, they're ex-referees, they're coaches, they're teaching staff, who all want to protect the game. So that's why we really came together. And as you say, we funded ourselves. It costs us money to keep it going. And we've given evidence to the DCMS committee in the House of Parliament, and we've had numerous meetings with World Rugby, the RFU and the Welsh Rugby Union. We did get very frustrated that World Rugby didn't really want to listen, and we thought they were rather arrogant in their responses.
And then with the court case, as you mentioned, have you, when you first heard of it, were you surprised originally, given what you'd seen in the past, or did you actually think the case should have been started sooner than 2021?
Was I surprised? Well, we were aware of the NFL problems in America from ex-players going on to develop CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And this has involved many, many, many players, and it has cost the NFL a lot of money. So we weren't surprised that rugby was following a similar path. As I said earlier, one of my sadnesses is that World Rugby seemed to think that rugby was totally different from American football. It isn't. I'm sad that it's come to needing a court case to have to really get things moving, and we try and hold ourselves separate from the court action, because we don't want to be involved. We want to be totally independent.
Yeah. And then I did just also want to ask, as I said, concussions are the main rugby injuries you hear of. Have you ever heard of any more progressive injuries and concussions that have had a longer term impact on players?
If you're talking about head injuries, yeah. Well, what we don't know in terms of long-term neurological damage is whether it is purely the concussions themselves that are to blame, or whether it is the subconcussive episodes. These are impacts that take place in collision sports like rugby, but which don't lead to a loss of consciousness. And equally, those collisions don't have to be head-on-head contact. A player can be running, get stopped, suddenly tackled very hard, juddered, and that can cause brain injury. So we're still trying to find out whether it is massive impacts, one-off, which cause the damage, or whether it is multiple smaller ones which lead to the damage. And what we do know is that there's different susceptibilities. Some people can have a number of concussions during their career and have no long-term problems. Others do. So it's a multifactorial problem. There's almost certainly likely to be a genetic element to it. And that's even before we get to talking about the female side of the game, which is very different as well.
That's what my next question is. Obviously, you hear the court cases for the male game currently. Do you see, with the female game having not had as long, it feels like, and not been in the spotlight as long, do you think we'll see a lot more being raised around the female game soon as well?
Well, I do know of women who've played international rugby who've gone on to develop CTE, so they are there. It's a numbers game, isn't it? Statistics. Yeah. Although I understand that the percentage of rugby players around the world who are now female is actually much, much higher than you think.
Oh, is it?
we do know that women, when they do get concussions, do seem to, on average, have more severe concussions and take longer to recover. And once again, that's a very complex issue because it has to do with neck strength, and there's other issues, including hormonal changes. We know with other types of female sports injuries, like cruciate ligament injuries of the knee, there does seem to be certain times of the menstrual cycle when they're more susceptible to injuries. So we have a lot to learn about female sport.
Yeah. And I did want to ask, what do you think the next advancements are to try and solve these head injuries, trying to make them happen less and everything? Do you think there is a major advancement in the near future, or
what's my wish list, or what do I think?
Do you think there's a likely advancement in the near future, or do you think they're all possibly a while away from being able to solve these issues?
Money gets in the way of welfare. When World Rugby wants to put on extra competitions and increase the number of games that people play, it doesn't sit well with their espoused views that welfare is their number one priority.
Yeah.
What we have to remember is it's not only how the game is played and refereed and reducing the number of head impacts, but it's also how they're managed afterwards. And I'm a firm believer in that we need to reduce the amount of collisions that take place in training.
Yeah.
We need to give players longer rest after they've had a concussion. I personally don't think it's been moved. It's been moved from 6 days to 12 days in the professional game, but in the amateur game it's 21 days.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any difference between a professional player's brain and an amateur player's brain. I think it always used to be 21 days.
Yeah.
Players need absolute rest between seasons. I think they need minimum 3 to 4 months rest, and there needs to be a maximum number of games per season. These are all the things which I feel that need to be put into place.
Do you also think there should be a limit for the number of concussions a player's allowed to have before they need to take possibly an even longer break or start to consider retirement maybe?
Well, the present guidelines on 12 days do take into account whether the players had previous concussions.
Yeah.
I do think we've advocated a concussion passport that players right through from schools onwards should have a record which they take with them as they go through their playing career of head injuries, so that it is obvious to the player, the parents, the coaching staff, whether players are susceptible. You do have a problem in that as I said, some players can get away with it, others can't.
Yeah.
And in a professional game, you then run up against issues of restraint of trade. But you do get players like Johnny Sexton, who retired last year, and George North a couple of years before him, who were known to have had multiple concussions.
Because the George North story of his concussion having been almost hidden away, really.
Yes, absolutely. And so we do feel that sometimes, as I do, when I see athletes with other injuries, you just sometimes have to sit down with them and say, I think enough is enough. The problem, however, of course, is that unlike a broken leg or a torn cruciate ligament, which we can see on scan and images, the damages to the brain has got to be really quite progressed before most routine scans will pick it up. Yes, there are some research tools with very expensive imaging that can pick up more dynamic changes, but they're not available at the moment to everybody who needs assessment.
And you said there's different waiting times for recovery between the different divisions, depending on if you're professional or playing at different times. What do you think has made them be more protective of these lower down divisions in a way and the players than with the professionals?
Well, they've taken a safety first view with the younger ones. With the younger students and with grassroots adult rugby, because we know, and that's another big issue, is that if you're concussed playing on a local park on a Saturday afternoon, your ability to get any advice and assessment is minimal. So they're saying, well, they should be off. Their excuse for dropping time down in the professional group is that they claim they've got world-class doctors who can assess them. And our view is that however experienced you are, we still don't know on clinical grounds when a brain is recovered. You can pass all the tests, that doesn't mean your brain's recovered.
I just want to ask, could you possibly actually explain what causes the concussions? It's obviously the impact, but is there a specific thing about the impact that causes the concussions?
Yes, well, as I said, the impact doesn't have to be directly to the head on head. It can be from an impact on the body lower down. And as we all understand, the brain's a very delicate tissue inside this hard case. And when it sustains an impact, either directly or indirectly, it gets knocked around inside the bony case. And what we believe is probably the most important is when they get rotational, torsional injuries, which damage the supporting structures around the brain, which cause it injury. And this is one of the problems with the instrumented mouth guards, is that they mostly look at linear impacts and measure it. They don't measure the rotational, torsional damage.
Is there anything else you want to say possibly surrounding the stories there are for rugby currently, head injuries in general?
The court case, understandably, has taken a very long time. Without any evidence, my own personal view is it probably won't come to court. I think the rugby authorities will try and settle it because they don't want the arguments brought forward into an open court of law. I think also you have to congratulate them when they do something right, which is lowering the tackle height. And so we mustn't moan at them about everything. We must recognise when they are doing good things, even if the introduction of that was a little bit poor in terms of its presentation to junior rugby clubs. But I think we are gradually getting there. And we don't know when we will, in terms of player damage, when we'll bottom out and start to come out the other way, because there's such a long lag. But what we do know is that whereas football, soccer, appears to have quite a long lag period, and that ex-players who go on to get dementia often in their 60s, 70s and 80s, what we're seeing in rugby is that these lads are getting in their 40s. So the damage appears to have been kind of exponentially larger.
It also feels to me like when players are having it announced this slowly, it is just becoming younger that players are announcing it, that they've had it. It started off it feeling like it was more 50s, 60s area, and then it's just slowly becoming sooner and sooner.
Yeah, and I think that's, because people who are keen to follow a professional career in rugby are starting much younger. They've been exposed at quite a young age to quite significant loads in training. Hopefully it is now beginning to soften again. And just the amount of collisions now, the size of people, their strength, and because of the changes that have been made in the game, if you look at how many minutes of that 80 minutes are actually the ball is in play, it is significantly greater than it was 20, 30 years ago, before the game went professional. And, what I say often is that rugby was always a dangerous game when it was an amateur sport. The difference was that everybody had to go to work on a Monday morning, and that kind of kept the game in check. The moment in 1995, 1996, when it went professional, and you suddenly let all these professional rugby players go into the gym 5 days a week, it suddenly became incredibly dangerous. And the rugby authorities have never caught up with it. They've never understood the dangers.
I can't think of anything else for now.
That's fine.
So if we possibly could do just a side angle videos of you, and possibly if I can think of another question during that, I might come back to it if that's possible. But
this is not working. I'm going to have to.
As I said, my school. I'm not from Northampton. I'm from Coventry, and my school. That was the main priority. Was you didn't get to do football. You didn't get to do anything. You had to do rugby.
Is that Henry VIII?
No, I was. I didn't actually go to school in Warwick. I'm from Coventry, but I went to school in Warwick. So.
Oh, which school?
Warwick School.
Oh, you went to.
Yeah, so
no,
I have to.
Great rugby school.
Yeah.
Played against them many times.
Forced into it no matter what we didn't get drugged. But yeah, no. So it was.
Well,
we have to see all
the problem is that what's going to affect this. It's not the pressure from us. It's going to be parents not wanting their kids to play, and it's schools not wanting to have rugby on the curriculum, and the court case. Those are the things which are really going to affect rugby. And a lot of parents don't want the kids to play rugby now.
Yeah, no, I've had to see. I've had to be told an awful lot. They eventually did give us the option to play hockey instead, because so many parents just were making it obvious rugby wasn't in their mind.
Yeah. Well, the thing was, the boast of rugby was it didn't matter what shape or size you were. There was always a position for you on the rugby pitch. That is not the case anymore. And if your parents are kind of 5'8" and 5'2", is there any point in you starting to play the game?
No.
Because you're never going to, which was not the case 30 years ago. Why get knocked around trying to do something? I mean, I played till I was 43, and I was just over 10 stone and 5'8". I mean, it was ridiculous. Right, so I've got it back on again now.